I feel like I say this every year, but 2023 was an amazing year for video games. There was a lot of very highs, a lot of anticipated games, and a lot of games that did not disappoint when they came out. Hello everyone, Kingdom Kid here with my top 10 games of 2023. If you're unfamiliar with how I do my top 10 games of the year, this is how I do it. First things first, obviously it had to be a game that had to be released in 2023, and I've had to have played it and beaten it, seen the credits, and everything, of course. And of course, on one other thing, this is my list, this is just my feelings, it's not reflective on anything else, it's just my personal thoughts and feelings of the games that came out. So another thing about this list is it cannot be a remaster or a remake of an older game. So unfortunately, a game like Super Mario RPG Remake would not make the list. However, a game like a Dragon Ishin could make the list because even though it is technically a remake or a remaster of an older title, it is a game that did not come over to the West when it first came out. So it technically counts on that. Yeah, that's basically it. It's just a game that came out this year. I had to have beaten it. No remake or remaster, with some exceptions to the rules there. Yeah, 2023 was a crazy year. There were so many good games that I played and just so many games that I didn't play that this was a very hard list to think of. There was a lot of games that I'm like, oh, this game for sure is going to make the list. This game for sure is going to make the list. But there was definitely a lot of okay, when we got down to it, it's how do I compare? So it's definitely also a lot of, again, a whole did I enjoy this game more, or did I enjoy the story more, the gameplay more, the music, anything like that. Not to say that there's anything wrong with any of the games that did not make this list, but I'm going to try to explain as much as I can of why I chose that game for this specific spot and such. There will be another video coming out after this with my honorable mentions, where I'll mention games that I did play that didn't make a list for one reason or another, and also mention games that I did not play that obviously didn't make the list, and I'll mention why I didn't play them for one reason or another. But yeah, guys, hope you're all ready for it, because this is going to be my top 10 games of 2023. Number 10, Persona 5 Tactica. It's crazy that I have a Persona game, let alone a Persona 5 game, this low on the list. That just shows how crazy of a year this year has been for video games. Persona 5 Tactica is a different kind of style of a game compared to any of the other Persona games or spin-off games in general. Granted, the only other spin-off games there really are fighting games, dancing games. You got the Entry and Odyssey Labyrinth-like games, which honestly, the animation for this takes a lot of, and I really like that. And then, of course, you have the other Strikers spin-off, which is kind of closer more towards... it's more like an action RPG than regular turn-based RPG like Persona usually is. So Persona 5 Tactica is basically like XCOM in terms of combat and gameplay. Everything else is, well, pretty much the same. The story is really a decent one, too. I love the characters of, obviously, it's Persona 5 cast. They're really fantastic. And the DLC is really good, too. The DLC that kind of takes place before the base game, which is really nice. This takes place around January, February, I believe. It takes place after the whole events of the base game, so it's getting pretty close to the moment where you leave to go at the end of Persona 5. And because of the DLC, you can definitely tell that this takes place during the Royal timeline, even though I don't think the game's split into different timelines. I'm pretty sure every single game is connected in one way, shape, or form. But regardless of that, this game is really fun. I loved it. The new characters that they introduced are great. I said that I like the art style. I can definitely see why some people don't really like the art style, but I think it grows on you. After a while, you kind of just ignore it if you're not really too into it. And plus, I feel like they are able to express themselves a lot more in this art style than they are comparatively to, say, the art style of the regular base game. I've said it before and I said it again. The art style reminds me of the Persona Q games, which I really love those games. Those games are fun. I hope they bring them to the Switch at some point. But yeah, the one thing I would have to say that's kind of not in a bad way is the music is very weak in this compared to all the other ones. Now, don't get me wrong, this game has some amazing tracks. The opening song, some of the boss music, there's some regular battle music that's pretty decent too, but they're not as... And of course, you know, you have like the hideout music, the music that plays during cutscenes and stuff like that, but they're not as memorable as, say, like, you know, all the other ones, like Takeover, the boss music, Gloomy Villain, the opening songs. I mean, the opening songs, you can't really compare the opening songs to any other tracks. The opening songs are really great, so that's why I'm trying to go all the other ones. Like I said, Blooming Villain, Last Surprise, Takeover. You have all those songs, and even the ones in Strikers were really good in terms of, you know, the environment music and the battle music. Not to say the environment music was really good, and then there's like just, I don't know, there's just something off about the music in general. Again, not that it's bad. The music is not bad in this game. Don't take what I'm saying as a bad thing. It feels like it wasn't as, it didn't hit as hard as all the other ones did, you know, from the other games. Even like the Persona Q games had some fantastic music, like Light the Night Sky Up, the battle music from the first game. I don't remember the battle music from the name of the battle music's from Q2, but they're really good. It does have also a pretty decently nice ending track too. And I will say too, again, going back to the DLC is really good too. Like the DLC has some fantastic music in terms of battle and outside stuff too, so it's really good. But still, I don't know, there's just one thing about that just didn't really hit as hard with the music as all the other one. But going back to everything else, gameplay, it does take maybe a little bit of a while to understand it, but after you understand, it's like, okay, this is how you do it. You know, there's a moment where you can hit enemies. If they're not around cover, you can get once more, so you can go around and then you unleash your triple attack, your all-out attack, basically, and that can, as long as it includes the enemy that you knock down, and you can move your characters into place, that's great. As soon as you do an action, your turn's over, but if you do knock down the enemy, they can keep going. And if you haven't moved the other characters, you know, they can only move certain areas, but if you can move them at certain moments, or certain places, to expand the triangle, to expand the reach of it, that you can get more enemies and possibly take the turns to take less turns to clear out the area, be great. That's also another thing too. There's I don't want to say challenges. I can't really think of it. There's like a, hey, here's a challenge, like finish the fight within 5 turns. Finish it with no one going down. Finish it by X thing, you know, that gives you stars and such. So it's actually quite easy to do that too. And then of course they bring in, you know, there's normal personas, and you have the skills that you expand because everyone shares the same levels, so you don't have to worry about that as well. So it's all good. Then you get like skill points that you can hit to equip your party to get more abilities and such, to expand their abilities. Kind of another thing that's also akin to Persona Q is how there's sub-personas. Sub-personas are basically everyone can equip a secondary persona. So unlike the protagonist being one that can switch between personas, everyone can get a second sub-persona with either an attack skill or a buff skill or a passive skill. This is a good way to, you can have a persona that gives you extra money at the end of the fights, or gives more experience as well, or a combination of both, or gives you a chance of dropping more rare personas, or anything like that. It's really good, and it's really nice and fun. Of course, the fusions are back as well, and then you can also fuse personas to make stronger weapons as well, more so for guns than regular weapons. You don't really upgrade your weapons, you're more so upgrading your guns only. But yeah, all in all, this game was fun, and I enjoyed my time with it, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Like I said, the story is fantastic, and of course, it's a Persona game. The story is always going to be good, in my opinion. But that is why that this game, Persona 5 Tactica, is my number 10 game of 2023. Number 9, The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Now again, a game like this being this low on my list, again, just shows how much great games that came out this year. The reason why Tears of the Kingdom is my number 9 and not at a higher spot, let's talk about some of the good stuff I like. Let's talk about all the good stuff I like. I like the dungeons more. The dungeons in here compared to Breath of the Wild, I loved it more. They didn't feel so samey because you're going into the same type of creature. You know, you weren't going to those divine beasts or anything like that. But they're all different temples, all had different mechanics. They were all good, and I really enjoyed it a lot. And the fact that you actually had like a kind of like a party member to explore those dungeons with as well was really fun. I love that. The last 20 minutes or so of the game, fantastically, epically done. I loved it. I love some of the story elements as well. Granted, it's somewhat similar to how Breath of the Wild did, where you kind of just see flashbacks. You know, in this case, you look at Dragon Tears and watch cutscenes and such. I did like that aspect as well. There's a lot of the side missions I love too. Love the characters, of course. Loved all the characters, both old and new, that came back. Either differently or such. They were all fantastic, and I loved it. Music is good too. The new mechanics that I loved with the the melding of this stuff, and I love the fact that in every single one of the shrines that you can literally, there's no wrong answer. If you can figure it out in one way, shape, or form, then that's the way to figure it out. There's no definitive, oh, you have to do it this way, and it's the only way you can do it. If you can figure it out, you can figure it out. Although, granted, there are some where it's like, okay, well, you went a long about way of figuring out. You could have done it a lot easier if you did it a different way, but I digress. That's one of the things I loved about this as well. Let's get to some of the not so good things about this. I'm not a big fan of the abilities that you get. I do love, like I said, I love, that you got your party members. Quote unquote, you got party members, and then they kind of like, oh, hey, because we're a sage now, I can give you a little bit of my power that can run around with you. I love that, and I love that you can just have a whole posse of people around you at every given time, and they do help with combat, but they feel like they don't help as much as they can. The abilities that they give you are not as good as the 4 abilities that you got in Breath of the Wild. Yes, there is kind of like a shield, like Daruk's shield, but you have to like actually talk to the spirit or the party member to do it. And that's another thing too. They all around you is like, I want to do this one, but like, no, I accidentally did these other ones thing, and it's just all over the place. There's not a revive ability like the first one had, which is crazy. There's only like, unless I'm in a specific fight, I'm only really using one ability as to help me traverse the skies of Hyrule when I'm on my paraglider, because it helps me push me and go forward a little bit, and even then it's not even by that much. I don't mind them using the same map. I don't mind them using the same map. I forgot to mention this in the ones that I love. I love the fact that there's like an underground too, which is really cool, and then the sky loft kind of areas are fantastic as well. I don't mind that they use the second map. I don't mind it at all. But it's literally kind of the same map. Yes, there's some differences here and there. Like the Rito village was all covered in snow, but then once you fix the problem, it's back to normal, There's like, oh, there's issues, but then, well, I just beat the boss, so everything's back to normal now. So it's like, oh, okay. But it's literally almost a one-to-one same thing. Yes, there are some differences in some areas, of course, but at the same time, it's very samey. I'm not a big fan of. I don't mind the weapon durability stuff. I don't mind that at all. I'm not a big fan in some of the cutscenes. At the end of each temple, they play literally the same cutscene, just with the different race. It's with the Rito or the Gerudo or the whatever, the Zora. It's the same cutscene, almost word for word. I think there's only one difference. There's only one cutscene that's different, and it's the one that with the Gerudo. That's the only one that's different, is because, well, they talk about Ganon in all of them, and they mention like, oh, we feel like we are responsible because he is a Gerudo. I mean, that's the only difference. But they're all like, oh, it's time to talk about the imprisoning war, and then your party member's like, Sacred Stone, imprisoning war. It's literally the same thing over and over again. I feel like they definitely could have done much better with that, because you're playing through it 4 times, and there's 4 different perspectives. But nope, it's just like, oh, hey, here's the thing, and then Zelda visited us and said that Link that says that we need to help our descendant or whatever, So I don't know. It just feels like they could have done a lot more with it. Again, not to say that it's bad, but it's like I feel like you really could have, kind of just gave it a little bit more thought. I know Zelda's not really too big on a lot of their story from other games, but I mean their story is still decent. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like they could have definitely been like, oh hey. I mean, again, like I said, the cutscenes from the flashback scenes are great. I just feel like there's also more. I feel like they also could have expanded more, like done more with Zelda in the past as well, which I feel like it felt like it was a good thing and a bad thing as well, which may be something they could do with DLC if they ever plan to do DLC. I feel like there should have been a way for us to play as Zelda in the past. It'd be hard because, like, well, could you explore the whole entire rule of Land of Hyrule? I mean, we'd have to have things differently because it can't be too much different than what we have in the regular Hyrule, but I feel like they could have done like, oh, hey, you can have like this little square section to play as Zelda in the past and such. Because to learn the relationship of Rauru and Sophia, or whatever her name was, kind of like expand their relationship, because they were like the parents that Zelda never really got to experience. Her mom passed away at a young age, and her dad was kind of the biggest piece of shit ever. So, and you felt like if you played Age of Calamity, the Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity game, you thought that there'd be some kind of like something in there. I mean, maybe there was. I never played the DLC for that, so maybe there was something from the DLC that kind of like came into play during Tears of the Kingdom, but there wasn't really anything about that. Again, Tears of the Kingdom is not a bad game at all. I did enjoy it. I loved playing it. I enjoyed it at all. And again, another bad thing is Ganon. Ganon is don't get me wrong, I think Ganon was great, but being only like, we got to see him as his big, buff, beautiful self for like only in the cutscenes, and then at the end of the game, he didn't feel like a force that was there the entire time. It was like, oh well, he's there, he's down where he's at, and yeah, the whole thing's like, well, he's gathering his power, because he's just a freaking husk, he's a corpse, and he's gathering his power so that he can be big and massive and all that stuff again. So it's like, I don't know, I feel like there could have been some ways differently. I just don't know how to properly explain. Again, not that it's bad by any stretch of the imagination. This is not a bad Zelda game. I did enjoy it. If you love Breath of the Wild, you will love Tears of the Kingdom. I thought it was really good. And again, if they ever do anything with DLC, I don't know what they would do. I feel like there were some things that they could expand upon, like Rauru stuff. I don't know. Again, there's a lot of highs in this game had, but I feel like there's also some lows that carried over from Breath of the Wild as well, and then some that just got added because of more stuff. I will say I probably did like this just a little bit more than Breath of the Wild, just because of the underground and the high sky stuff. Now, if they ever do a third Zelda with this, timeline or however they want it, I don't want it to be the same map. Let us be somewhere else. You can have the same Link, the same Zelda, just be somewhere else. Be in a different place and such, or literally make a linear Zelda or something like that. I think it's time for us to like change it a bit if they do want to make a third Zelda game in this format. Again, I loved it. I enjoyed playing it, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching me play this if you did. But yeah, that is why Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is my number 9 top 10 games of 2023. Number 8. Master Detectives Archives Rain Code. This game was perfect. Well, not really perfect. I did have some issues with it. Not a lot of issues, though. I am a big fan of the Danganronpa games, which is obviously this made by the same team, same guy who did Uchikoshi was amazing, same art style, kind of the same composer for the music as well, which is great. The music's fantastic. Love the art style. Love the characters. Everyone that was involved. Although I did have some issues with, some of the characters, but I kind of look past them in a way. The story is fantastic. You're playing as Yuma Kokohead, an amnesiac detective in training. Sorry, I just kind of spoiled the first chapter of the game. Well, chapter 0. But it's a fantastic game. And then you learn that you are possessed by a ghost called Shinigami who's a death god, who helps you kind of solve mysteries in a way. And as you're explaining through Kanai Ward, which is a fantastic open world place, you go around every single chapter, you meet the other detectives, you try to find the secret of Kanai Ward and everything about it. I love this game. I think this game was really fantastic. I love all the detectives, and there's they each have their own kind of quirks or fortes in a way. While like one, for example, can just make a perfect disguise into anyone that they've ever seen. They just need to be. If they looked at them once, like, oh, yep, I can disguise myself as that person. One can rewind time for however long. Someone else can just become they're all just great. I don't really want to spoil their powers in case you guys ever play this game, but it's a fantastic game. They're all great. And of course, I love all the characters, and the voice acting's really good too. The characters grew on me. I love how it's very similar in terms of Danganronpa in a way, in terms of like how the story progresses somewhat. However, unlike Danganronpa, there's no class trials. There's literally kind of like it's still the whole like, choose your, you get the questions of like, what was used for this thing, and then you have your options, and you're like, you gotta pick that one, and such. It's really good with the solution keys are basically your truth bullets. And, you review it, everything, and be like, how is so-and-so is this? There's investigation points where you go to crime scenes and investigate and find clues and be like, what's this? How did that happen? How did the killer do this? How did the killer do that? And everything. It's all great. And then the mystery labyrinths, where you go into the mystery labyrinths to solve the problem. It's really good. I love the one thing that I'm kind of like not so keen on is how it really, once you're done with the mystery labyrinth, what happens afterwards. Because you're going up against the Peacekeepers, and their whole shtick is like, we make the fucking rules, we do whatever we want. They don't really care about logic or the truth at all. It's like, whatever we say is the truth. So it's the whole, what happens at the end of the mystery labyrinth, once you solve the crime, then I can't really explain this without spoiling it. So spoiler alert, when you do the mystery labyrinth and you find out who the true criminal is, the criminal dies like right away. They die right away, and usually it always happens in front of everyone. So before you enter the mystery labyrinth, everyone kind of just somehow gathers up, all the important people, all the peacekeepers, the suspects, and everyone, including the killer, you and your detective partner and such. And then once you come back after solving the mystery labyrinth, the killer just dies, and everyone's like, oh my god, what just happened? What's going on? And everything. Well, of course, at some point, Shinigami just possesses them. He's like, oh, this is what happened. But then sometimes it's like, they don't really care. Like, the Peacekeeper shouldn't care. It's like, why should we care if this is the truth? Our truth is this or whatever. So I feel like there could have been some other way they could have done that, where they could have like, whoever the killer was confesses to the Peacekeepers, confesses their crime, and then just die. But I mean, I get it because, Shinigami is a death god, so of course she kills. But I love everything, like how we get, how we go through it, and how Yuma is, rethinking of his viewpoints of a detective, what he thinks a detective is, what detectives actually are. Everything about that is great. It's all great. And the twists and turns that this game has are phenomenal, that I think really all adds up. And then especially like those moments where like, I think this is how it happened. And then they're like, no, it didn't happen like that. It happened like this. It's like, I feel like there's a lot more where it's like, unfortunately with Danganronpa, it's like, oh yeah, this person, like, well, sometimes you can kind of figure out what happens in the Danganronpa games. You can figure out like, like after a little bit, it's like, oh, this person killed that person. And then, yeah, you get your, explanation at the end. But then, yeah. While with this game, you could be like, oh, I have no idea. But it's like, you can kind of theorize like, oh, maybe, what about this and this and this? And it's like, well, you got some of it right, but like, why did you come up with that thing? So I feel like it's a lot more of building up intrigue. Like, you're actually playing as a detective, which I think is really cool. And so I am all for Uchikoshi doing these kinds of games. I'm super, or not Ichikoshi, Kodaka. It's Kodaka that makes these games. I think I said Ichikoshi earlier too, but Kodaka. I am so up for him continuing this. I don't know how he'll do a sequel. Like, does he just do a sequel with different characters, like maybe 1 or 2 returning characters from this game showing up in the second game? I don't know how he's going to do it, but I'm all for it, because I'm just all for it. I cannot wait to see what he could do next in this series and such. And he's really enjoyed it too. On Twitter, he talks about it a lot, and I cannot wait for that. Now, the game with him and Ujikoshi, that's the game I'm looking forward to as well. I can't wait for that one. But anyway, Master Detectives Archives Ranked Code is my number 8 of my top 10 games of 2023. Number 7, Final Fantasy 16. Again, I honestly expected this game to be higher on my list, but again, it just shows how much great games that came out this year were. Final Fantasy 16 was a long-awaited, next mainline Final Fantasy game since Final Fantasy 15. Made by the same people behind Final Fantasy 14. Fantastic game as well. Yoshi P and the team did an outstanding job with this game. Follow Clive Redfield. Definitely has a lot of Game of Thrones-like inspiration, which is really good. Countries at war with control of crystals, and how there's a blight that's kind of like sweeping over the country that like saps the land of its ether, aka like the life force, and no magic can be used in those areas. It's really good. The story is fantastic. It takes place like within 3 main periods of Clive Redfield's life. Granted, one's not so long as the other 2, but it's still great. You play as him as a child, where everything kind of starts going on, and then he awakens. I should mention the icons. The icons are, the summons. Bahamut, Shiva, Ifrit, all that stuff are all the summons on their icons. They're basically controlled by. They basically are the people, and are fantastic. They're really revered as kind of like high powered. There could be people in like political standings, military standings, kings or rulers of countries or dominions, all that stuff. But then when the emergence of a second icon appears, the icon of fire, a second icon of fire, Ifrit shows up. That's where things kind of get itself thrown into the mix, and it's great. I love it. Then of course, you're playing as Clive Redfield. This is one of the moments where, granted, in Final Fantasy 15 you were only playing as Noctis until I believe until the DLC came out. Then you could play as the other ones. I can't remember if they added that in the main game where you could play as the other characters or not, but only during combat. I'm not entirely remember of that. But the combat is really fun. It's definitely when you have the people who are behind the Devil May Cry combat. Platinum Games, I believe, also helped out in this as well. The team that helped make the Kingdom Hearts combat as well. The combat is fun and great. You can use the icon powers. You start off with the Phoenix, but eventually you learn that Clive can absorb the icon's powers from the other dominants, the people who are the icons. So you can grab Garuda's power. He can get Titan's power, and they're all great. You can change it up. That's another thing too. So you can have 3 icons equipped at a time. And then if you ever master their abilities, you can equip their abilities onto whatever icon. So each icon has their own set of circle skills. So like the circle skill could be a dash to get close to the enemy, could be a grab, could be a block, could be anything. And then you can have the 2 abilities tied to it as well. And if you master those abilities can be equipped into any of the icons, which is fantastic. The combats are really great. The story is really good too. I do love the story as well. It's fantastic. It does keep you at the edge of the seat a couple of moments. I will say the boss battles are probably the biggest thing that this game has for it, which is fantastic. Each icon fight is bigger and badder and more all over the place than the last, and it just keeps getting better and better in my honest opinion. I do love it a lot. Even the side quests definitely have a couple of good moments as well, especially before the second time skip. there's some good side quests there where there's a lot of people who are born that can use magic without the use of crystal. They're labeled as branded. So there's like a brand mark on their cheek or somewhere visible for people to say that's used by a poison. So you can't really remove it without some other high means. But when people see branded, they're like, oh, that means that they can use magic. And a lot of people look down on them. A lot of people who can't use magic look down on them and think they're higher and more superiority than the ones who are branded. So yeah, and that can be learned at like such a young age, and you can go around where there's early on during the main quest, there's like a mother and a child comes in, and they learn that like, oh yep, I was born, or yep, I had a second child, but they were branded. Like, oh my god, I can't believe I had that inside me for that long. And then the child like, when will I have a brother or a sister? And it's like, oh, don't worry, we'll get you a brother or sister. Like, they don't even treat them as humans. Like, it's so fucked up in that way, and it's all over the place. It's so crazy. I do want to say, like, there's kind of moments where it's like, okay, this feels like a weird moment. It feels like a weird, like, shift of things, of like, oh, like this was kind of like there is an ever present entity or evil, you could say, that does show up before the last time skip, and then that's always like a constant, like, okay, this thing is here and such, but it's never really addressed a lot until later on in the time skip, in the final time skip. So it's kind of like, I can kind of see like why people are like, well, the final or the main villain kind of falls a little bit flat, which kind of does in some moments, but I feel like once we learn more about it, it's like, okay, it's a little bit better, it's understandable type thing and such, and learn it's really good. I will say again, the story is good. I'm not going to say anything bad about the story. I mean, there are some moments again where the story's like, oh, and such, but I loved it. The combat's good too, and like, just find out the different combos that you can do. Just go around all over the place. Like, you can grab your enemy, bring them closer, and then you can just like hit them and such. And there's skills where like you block them with a skill and you just go all over the place, and just nice counterattacks, and just the combat is, I feel like the combat is definitely the highest thing in the year. And of course the music. Oh, the music. Of course you got fucking Soken on this thing. Oh, it's beautiful. Definitely deserved that at the Game Awards. Soken deserved all the praise, and the team as well did a fantastic job. Again, Ben Starr, the voice actor of Clive, was fantastic at this. Sid, the guy who voiced Sid, I can't really remember his name, did great. Everyone who voiced the character in this game, I think all the voice actors and everything were fantastic in this game. They all were wonderful. Just bravo all across the board. Wonderful. I loved every minute of it. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next DLC that's coming out sometime later this year. The DLC for this game is great. I love the fact that like Yoshi P is like, yep, nope, we're done. Like, they don't plan to make a sequel for this game. As soon as that DLC is done, it's done. And I can live with that. And I love it when, you know, game directors are like, no, we're done. I told everything that I want to tell with this game and the DLC, and it's all good. So I love that and such. And I will defend this, like, I defend Final Fantasy 15 because I love Final Fantasy 15. I will defend Final Fantasy 15. I will defend Final Fantasy 16. I think they're all great, and I loved it. And that's why Final Fantasy 16 is my number 8. My number 7 of top 10 games of 2023. Number 6, Paranormasight and the 7 Mysteries of Honjo. This game is wonderful. The art style is beautiful. The story is fantastic. The characters are likable as all hell. It's all in all a great experience. I highly recommend pick this game up. It's available on Switch and Steam. I hope it becomes available on other stuff too. It's a great game, and you get a good price for it as well. It's very visual novel-esque as well. It's a very visual novel-like game with some minor Not really high gameplay styles. There are moments where you kind of like have to do some choose some stuff where you'd be like, oh, you're somewhat timed, then do all this stuff. So the premise of this game is there are curses around, and each curse stone has their own kind of like an ability. You can curse someone with. So actually, before I talk about the curses, I should talk about what they all are tied to. They're all tied to the Rite of Resurrection, which basically means like if you so seek the right, you could get a curse stone that will help you get soul dregs, aka basically souls, to resurrect someone that you so seek the right to resurrect someone. There's a lot of characters. It's called the Seven Mysteries of Honjo, but there's more curse stones. There's a lot of curse stones that are tied to some urban myths in the that happen in the area of Japan that they are at, and the curses are all over the place. They can have, well, all right, my curse is, well, if you turn your back on me, I can curse you and kill you and take your soul. And the curse, if curse bearers kill other curse bearers, they get more soul dregs, and they get whatever soul dregs they had as well, and such. So you have people who are trying to prevent the resurrection from happening by trying to. You have someone who seeks the Rite of Resurrection, not to use it, but to kind of prevent it from happening. So they get a curse stone, and they're trying to gather all the other curse stones without having to use their curse, and hopefully before they use their curse as well to get all good. I do not want to explain so much about this game because I do not want to spoil anything about this game. I'm trying to give you the bare bones. It's literally like 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, like that, in a way where it's like I'm trying to say less to give you more. It is a fantastic game. You just have to play this game. Please play this game. The developers, like the director of this game who brought it up the first time. This is like the first time any of his games have come over to the West here, and I would love to play any more games by him. And yeah, and again, art style is fantastic. All the characters are very likable and have some nice quirks and all that stuff, and relatable as well. There are moments where a character will go through something and you're like, okay, yeah, I can relate to a character in that moment as well. I can't sing the praises of this game much. I'll be honest, I really wanted to put this game higher on my list, but it's just, again, goes to show how great of a year this was for video games. And we have a nice little indie-like game like this come out, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. I want to play more of this kind of game. I want to play more of these games from this developer, from this team and creator. I want to play more. It's wonderful. It's like, again, I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to accidentally spoil this game for you. Like, I gave you one curse stone description, and the only reason why I did that is because it's the first one. Like, I'm not going to give you any other ones. I could give you some more, but I don't can, because the mystery that this game is around is also the thing too. And again, much like with Rain Code, there's a lot of picking the pieces yourself. Like, okay, how do you do this? And there's a lot of like just interesting things. Like the storyteller, the guy who first pops up, who kind of like starts telling you the story. He's such an interesting character too, and everything. And there's just moments in here where the game is like, well, how are you going to get out of this one? And you know, trial and error. It's like, I can't get out of this. And then you figure it out. You're like, oh my gosh, that's how you figure out. That's like so cool. Like, and it's all that great. Again, I don't want to spoil it for you. Just play this game. Please play this game. I played this game. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. You're definitely getting the bang for your buck with this game. It's wonderful. If you are a little bit iffy on it, this game does seem to go on sale quite often, so you can pick it up for 30% cheap. I mean, it's only like what, $15, $20 most of the time anyway, so it's still wonderful. And again, a lot of replay value, a lot of like, you know, thinking of, well, how do you do this and such. And there's one collectible with bird stickers. I recommend picking those up because every now and then when you pick those up, depending on the character that you're playing as, Yeah, they have a great reaction. And by the way, yes, you play as different characters throughout the game. It's wonderful. This game is great. This game is great. I will sing the praises of this game from the highest of the highs, from the tallest of the mountaintops. This game is fantastic. It is really worth your time for the story in general. But again, the music that comes into it's fantastic as well. This is a wonderful soundtrack. And again, I love the art style. I think the art style is really good too. And I can't wait to play more from this team, from this developer, from this game director. But yeah, that's why Paranormal Sight is my number 6 of my top 10 games of 2023. Number 5, Spider-Man 2. I love this game so much. It's the sequel that we needed with Spider-Man. The fact that you get to play as both Miles and Peter, Spider-Man is fantastic. And I believe this is probably one of the best incarnates of Venom that we ever had. How it was set up and everything. How the characters and everyone interact with each other. It was all good. Like the beginning of the game where you're fighting Sandman was the very good tone setter for this game. And then learning about Kraven. I think Kraven's also another one of Spider-Man's kind of like I don't want to say underappreciated, but I guess somewhat underappreciated villains in his rogue gallery. Kraven's a really high one from there. And the thing is, he's a little bit different from how I've seen before from past iterations as well. Mostly the old 90s Spider-Man cartoon, but it was really good. And again, I mentioned before, Venom was fantastic. Harry was fantastic. When we got the symbiote suit on us was wonderful. It was all over the place, and just seeing how it affected Peter, how it affected MJ, how it affected Miles. It was all good. Just all around, I really did enjoy this game. It was fantastic. And of course, much like the first Spider-Man, the last moments were really good too. I do say that there's probably a lot of people that, like, for some reason didn't like how Venom was done in this game, or it's like whatever, but it's like you gotta take understanding. Eddie Brock, who is normally Venom in almost every other iteration of Venom, was not the main Venom here. That was given to Harry Osborn. Harry. I think I said Henry at some point. It's Harry Osborn. So it was really good still. But like, I feel like that's still kind of built on the relationship of Peter and Harry in a way too. And then when when Harry learns that Peter's Spider-Man, even seeing some of the old villains from the past games, like we got to see Mysterio, how he's kind of like trying to like redeem himself, same with Tombstone. That's really cool too, that you got to see a lot of that from old villains from the first game, and even some of the Miles game as well. It's just wonderful. I love, of course, the characters Genki that showed up and Haley that were more prominent in the Miles game. Being in here as well was wonderful. Even the one mission that you got to play as Haley for like a little bit was fun and just wonderful, because she's deaf, so of course when you're playing her, you don't hear like the crazy sounds going around, which is, it's wonderful that way. And it's just great. I feel like this is great too. The little bit of the soundtrack, I don't want to say a little bit of soundtrack. The ambiance more so, but the soundtrack of this is beautiful as well. The story is great. The web slinging, the web gliding. I don't know how they improved it from the first Spider-Man game and the Miles game, but they somehow did improve it in this game. With the web slinging, it made me feel more like Spider-Man. The web gliding was fantastic. Just going around New York City, it was fun. All the collectibles were really cool too. With the Sandman bits, the spider bots, they were all fun and enjoyable. And the side missions and the Friendly Neighborhood app from the Miles game was wonderful too. The voice acting, of course, fantastic. Euro Lowenthal was great. Laura Bailey. The guy who voiced Venom, I can't remember his name. The guy who voiced Harry was great. Miles was fantastic. They were all great. It was really good. Again, it was wonderful. And you can definitely see where they are going with the next game. I am curious though, like, unfortunately with Insomniac having their whole thing hacked, an illegal activity happening on them, I think there was kind of like a little bit of a roadmap of DLC to be released for this game. I don't know if there will be, or if they're still planning on doing it. I'm sure they are still going to plan to do it, but they're probably now going to take more time with it, obviously, because of everything that happened with them. But I had a few ideas of there's some side missions, like, not really side missions, but they're kind of like, without finding, for lack of a better term, side missions where like, oh, this could be implemented in either DLC, or it could be implemented in some like a bridge game, kind of like how Miles was a bridge game from Spider-Man 1 to Spider-Man 2. If there's a bridge game for Spider-Man 2 to Spider-Man 3, because we are going to get a third game. We are going to get a third game just with what happened at the end of the game here. It would be interesting to be like, oh, this could either be a DLC or this could lead into what happens in the bridge game. Because I feel like how that works is like, this definitely deserves a more focus than how we had there. So that's why it's a whole like, oh, I feel like it could, like, that's why it's like, oh, it could work as like somewhat of its own thing in the third game, or not the third game, but like in the bridge game to 2 and 3. But it's like, because it feels like, okay, this is definitely going to be of a more bigger issue and such. Yeah, I know a lot of people probably like, and I can somewhat see it too, is like the story probably didn't have as much of an impact as the first one. And I'll be honest, I did tear up during the first one. And this one did have me tear up too, by the end, just because, what happens. But I feel like this game still had a fantastic story all around. The combat was also improved. I loved it for bits. Like I said, with the Friendly Neighborhood app helping out as well, it was wonderful. The way they switch between Peter and Miles, fantastic. And how in some fights where you end up like, going into a fight with, street thugs or someone, if you're playing as Peter, Miles will show up. If you're playing as Miles, Peter will show up. And then at the end, they kind of do like high fives. Like one's going for a high five, one's going for a hug, and then they switch it around, and they're like, oh, okay, or a handshake or whatever, and then they're like, oh, I bring in a hug, and then they do the Spider-Man meme point. It's great. And then like for the little bit where Harry is like wearing his secret, I can't remember the exact name of it, but like for like Secret Agent Venom outfit, basically, where he's wearing that suit, he can come in and help you too. It's really good. And I was not there was a villain that showed up in here. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's a villain that showed up at close to the end that did not show up, and I was like, oh my god! I was like, that's great! I was like, oh, that villain showed up, like, oh, that is fantastic, and I loved it. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to see what. I pray that Insomniac can recover from what happened to them. I'm excited to see what they do. I'm always a big fan of Spider-Man. I've always been a big fan of Insomniac games ever since they did Spyro, the first Spyro games. I've been a fan of them ever since, and I can't wait to see what they have in store for our favorite web-slinging hero. And I'm just excited for this game. This game's still fun. I do need to get back into it and such, and yeah, I can't wait. But anyway, that is why Spider-Man 2 is my number 5 in my top 10 games of 2023. Number 4. Sea of Stars. I love this game so much, and much like Paranormal Side, I feel like it just came out. I do remember, though, I think I did remember hearing a little bit of some whispers of this game every now and then before it came out, but I didn't really quite, pay too much attention to it until it came out. It just came out, and it was, luckily, it was free for premium PlayStation Plus members, and I was like, sure, I'll play it. And I'm like, okay, no, this is a great game. Loved it. I loved it. The art style, nice little pixel art style. I am a big sucker for pixel art games like this. It is beautiful. Sabotage Games did a fantastic job. I believe this game's also supposed to be somewhat of a prequel to their older game, The Messenger, which I haven't played, but I'm all for trying that out. I would love to play that game. I think that game's also free for PlayStation Plus premium members as well, so maybe I should check that out, but I digress. Let's talk about this game. So, You are playing as two characters, Valerie and Zale, who are lunar solstice warriors. One born on the summer solstice, one born during the winter solstice. Right? Right, yeah. Spring, and there's spring and fall equinox, yeah. So, and there's some other solstice warriors who their job is to guard the world from the Fleshmancer, from the evil dark enemies, minions of the Fleshmancers, and prevent them from becoming world eaters or world enders that will end up breaking the world and such. They are only vulnerable during eclipse, so that's when the Solstice Warriors have more, their power is more prominent, is during eclipse, because, you know, it has both the sun and the moon represented. This is a fun game. The combat is very interesting. It's a whole, you know, you attack, and if you attack good, if you time the attacks perfectly, you get another hit in, and you restore your MP as well, so then you can do some of your stronger attacks, and eventually the enemies drop little balls that you can absorb into your character that could do some elemental damage. So if you're playing as a Valerie, and you absorb her power, her regular attacks will now do her lunar damage, her lunar power, lunar damage on the enemies and such. And speaking of the enemies will do big attacks that have locks. So if they have locks where they'll have like a sword symbol, a hammer symbol, a sun symbol, moon symbol, and some other symbols. So in order to prevent them from doing that attack, you need to break those locks. And how you gotta break them is you gotta manage your attacks. Like, okay, if I attack with Valerie, Valerie will take care of the blunt attacks because that's her regular attack is blunt. If I attack with Zale, he'll do the slash attacks because he has a sword, so they do slash attacks and get rid of the things. Now they do have abilities where they have like, oh, here's an ability. They have an ability that will do a blunt attack with moon power, and Zale has a slash attack with sun power. And then of course they have like just a regular moon, just a regular sun attack. It's really good. So it's a lot of like, you also gotta kind of think like, okay, how can I prevent them? If you can't break all the locks, like, okay, how can I do this to make sure that attack does not do as much damage as it could? So you'd be like, okay, I can get rid of 3 locks out of these 4, so the attack will only be like, you know, it won't hit for 100% power, it'll hit for like 80% power or whatever like that. So it's wonderful. I loved it so much. The game is fantastic. The area is great. The music, oh my god, the music of this game alone is just wonderful. I can bop to it as well. I really want to buy the soundtrack for this game if they release a soundtrack for it as well. I heard that they're actually going to do some DLC for this game, so I'm like, oh, that's a surprise. I'm all for it. I'll definitely play a DLC for this game. I don't know how or what, but I'm all excited for it. Yeah, I mentioned the characters. All the characters are charming as hell. They are fantastic. There's some great comedy in here as well, and I love it. There are some rough battles too. I will say that there were some rough fights that I had in this game, but it's really good and such. And I loved it. It was great. I am definitely a big fan of this studio. Definitely a big fan of this company now because this game was wonderful. It's definitely worth however much it would. I will definitely buy this game. Like, I will definitely like buy this game. If it's like $20, sure. If it's $30, sure. $40, sure. I would buy this game at $60. It's wonderful and is well worth it. I cannot wait. If there is DLC, which I've heard there was DLC coming out, I'm not entirely sure, but I will definitely check out the DLC. I'll check out anything else that these guys do. I'll even go check out The Messenger. I can't wait. This game is wonderful, and the story is great. It's definitely well worth picking this game up for and playing it, much like with Paranormal Study. Just please pick up this game. You'll definitely get your money's worth, and it's wonderful and such too. It's great. And Sea of Stars, wonderful game. Loved it through and through. The art style, pixel art is amazing. Characters I love. Music's great. It's wonderful. Definitely pick it up because that's why Sea of Stars is my number 4 of my top 10 games of 2023. Number 3. Lies of P. Man, this game was wonderful. I loved it. I loved it, which is so weird because I don't know what there was. I played the demo for this game, like that came out a few months before, or like a month before the full game came out, and there was just something that felt off about for me. I don't know why. I was like, oh, it feels weird. I don't want to say clunky, but it kind of felt clunky when I had to like do some dodges or, you know, some swings or attacks. Just didn't feel right. And again, it was a demo. I don't think it was a full build of the full game, so there's definitely time for improvements. But once I had the full game in my hands and I was playing, I was like, oh my gosh. It was like, this feels different than the demo. It feels not as clunky or no clunk at all. It feels great. I enjoy playing through it. Everything was great. This is definitely one of the best, probably from software type. This is probably one of the best from software Souls-like games ever. Like, it's fantastic. A little bit of like, I don't know, like it's just wonderful. The game's fun. It's definitely has a lot of Bloodborne-esque aesthetics to it, which I love it. Of course, it's somewhat like following along the puppet of Geppetto's puppet, you know, Pinocchio, but the story is much deeper than that. It goes all around. You know, there's like a petrification disease that kind of like, you know, is going around the regular people, but then there's also like a puppet frenzy going around that causing puppets to attack and kill humans. You know, one of the first rules of robotics is do not harm humans, and yet there's some kind of like a virus going around that's causing the puppets to harm humans and kill them and such. It's crazy and all over the place. It's great. Like the story that's in this game is fantastic. The characters that you meet, they all have their sense of charm and such, and I love more than others, but like, it's great. And like, you know, you even have the little blue fairy, Sophia, who helps you around. Then you have Jiminy Cricket, who's kind of like your guide, who, you know, that's your conscience, but your guide. So it's great. This game is just all over the place in such a good way. And I don't know, man, it was really good. I love how it does something different with its weapons compared to any of the other Dark Souls-like games, where your weapon has a handle and a blade, and then eventually, if you get more weapons, you can like, oh, I want to take the blade of this weapon and attach it to the blade. I want to take the handle of this weapon and attach it to the blade of that weapon, and you know, you can mix and match and such. And the good news is, like, well, when you upgrade your weapons, it'll always have that. It'll have, you know, upgrade of like +4. The handle will be a +4 while the blade's like a +3 or whatever like that. It's great, and I love it. The bosses are very unique as well, and the music that a lot of this game has too. Like, the boss music's really good. The record that plays during, like, the records that you find throughout the game are fantastic as well. And it's just wonderful. The side stories that some of your characters have are great too, you know. Much like, somewhat like Dark Souls games, some of the story is played through by doing some side story, reading through item descriptions, and all that stuff, which is really good and such. I definitely want to go back into this game. Because there's a mechanic in this game where it's, do you lie or tell the truth? Now, that's another rule about puppets here, is the puppets cannot lie. However, you are a unique puppet that can lie. So it's kind of like a whole, you know, it's the opposite of Pinocchio, where you know, Pinocchio's not supposed to lie to become a real boy, while this Pinocchio seems to need to lie in order to become a real boy. Like, that's how it feels. It's really good. It's really good in that aspect, and it's just so wonderful too, because there's definitely like there's some side missions, you know, that you play, and then it's like, oh, well, do you tell the truth to this person or do you lie to them? Sometimes the truth is not the good thing, so you always have to lie to them. So the lie is like always, you kind of like always want to pick the lie, but sometimes picking the truth is not bad either. I mean, it's not that big of a deal either way, but eventually you do see some kind of changes throughout your character as well. It's like, oh, you changed because of you lied like that and such. And it's really good. It's such a good game too. You know, like as you lie, you know, there's a cat that's around the hotel, your base area, that will actually, you know, you can pet it more. I honestly don't know because I don't know what happens if you tell mostly truths. I've only talked about my experience of doing it as I'm playing through lies, so, or through the lie side. So, you know, as you lie, you know, you lie and, you know, you get to pet the cat and everything. Or if you know, tell the truth, I don't know what happens because who knows. That's something I gotta do because much like a lot of the Souls-like games, this game also has multiple endings where there's one ending where it's the ending is this way if you tell the truth or tell mostly truth, and the end this ending is if you tell mostly lies. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting. And then there's also like another ending as well that you can do on either side, which is very good. Again, this game's wonderful, and the story is great too. There's DLC that's going to come out for this game. I can't wait for that. I cannot wait for a sequel, which they say they're working on as well. So it's wonderful. I can't wait. Lies of P is definitely a fantastic game in my opinion. And I'll be honest, at one point I was actually thinking about this being my number one, but eventually I was like, okay, let's stop and think a while. I was like, not quite. So I was like, okay. Unfortunately, I did have to put it at my number 3 then. But it was, I mean, that's great. I'll be honest, again, these top 3 games, these last 3 games, at one point, all could be my number 1. But thinking about now, thinking a bit over, it took me a while. Lies of P is my number 3 of my top 10 games of 2023. Number 2. Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name. What a mouthful of a name of this game. But oh my god, was it fantastic. God, oh, you know me. The Like a Dragon / Yakuza series is always going to be a really high one, but this one is no different. This one is kind of like I don't want to say it's a spin-off, but it's kind of a spin-off in a way, but it's definitely well worth playing if you have played any of the past Yakuza games as well. This one takes place between Yakuza 6, during 7, and before 8. It's a wonderful game. I know a lot of people are like, oh, this is the Yakuza 6 we deserved for the ending of Yakuza 6. But in my opinion, I feel like Yakuza 6 still was a good ending. I don't care what anyone says. I feel like this is a great game. So, for spoiler alert for some of the older games here, you're playing as Kiryu Kazuma again, like the old games. However, he goes by his codename Yoru now. At least he tries to. So, you know, he's trying to live up to the promise that he made to the group that he is with now. But obviously some people recognize him, and, you know, shit starts hitting the fan in more ways than one. So he's trying to, you know, keep his secret under wraps while trying to, you know, still live up to the honor of, you know, of what he's through. The gameplay of this is not much different than any of the old Yakuza games. However, there's some differences. There's 2 styles. You have the Yakuza style, which is basically kind of like the similar styles that Kiryu has in the past games, and the Agent style, which is a little more like a little bit better, where he has gadgets that he throws out. So he can throw out a little bit of a type of like a spider string that he can use to like pull enemies towards him, swing them around. He can send out drones at some point. He can throw bomb-like cigarettes. He can shoot at them with his scooters and such, and it's great, especially when you're in your extreme heat mode, and then there's a skill that you get that uses all of them. It's wonderful. It's a fantastic heat action move. Great stuff. I love the side content in this game as well. Akame, who helps out with a lot of the side stuff mostly, is probably one of the best characters in all the Yakuza series. Fantastically written. She is a wonderful character, and her voice actress is wonderful as well. I have yet to hear her English voice actor, but I'm sure she did great too. And speaking of this game did not come out right away with the English dub, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, you know, the guy who took over Kiryu English was like, oh, he's not blah blah blah, he's a YouTuber, boom boom boom. It's like, he's a great voice actor. He really knocks home the big important scenes here. I think a lot of people are just on his ass because of the karaoke songs, but it's whatever. It's karaoke. You're not supposed to be a professional when you sing. People are just automatically like, oh, they're. I guess indoctrinated. That's not really the right word I would choose, but without really thinking of a better word here, is they're just more so like they're just used to all the Japanese voice actors being great singers because they're all great singers too. So I digress. That's a discussion for another kind of video. But I loved it. I love this game so much, and yeah, even I want to play through the entire game dubbed again. I hope that there's like a new game. No, not really new game plus, because these games really don't really have new game plus. But yeah, I love this game. I think this is probably also one of the easiest Yakuza games to platinum. The side content is great. There's one of my favorite side missions is the one that is also kind of like a crossover with Lost Judgment, or the Judgment characters with Kaito. It's really fantastic. It's a great sub-story. And there's a lot of the sub-stories here also get brought up with Kiryu. Kind of like he remembers all the stuff that happened to him in the past and such, and he ties them into the characters that he met along the way. It's like, oh, that's really good, because those were some good stuff. The Coliseum aspect of this game, I feel like, was probably one of the best Coliseums that this series has ever had. You have your regular Coliseum fights where you're one-on-one, but then there's also like a Joru Clan, kind of like a Hell Rumble. That's what it's called, where you have your whole group going up against another group. It's fun. It's definitely a fun aspect of this too. Really fun. The Amon fight that this one has too is actually a pretty fun one too. I'd say it's one of the easier ones in my opinion. I'm honestly surprised still of how I beat the Amon in here, but it was still fun as hell. Loved it. I loved it all. The combat is great, and let's get into the story. I mean, I kind of already gave the little premise of how the story went, but oh my gosh, this is also a short game too. I mean, this game was only like $40, but again, bang for your buck. It's like 5 chapters, which is pretty short, but the chapters are pretty lengthy too. So I really did like them here and such, and it's just wonderful. And of course, the last chapter really hits you. And don't even get me started at the ending. This game definitely made me cry. And I loved it, and I feel like this is only just a small portion of what Infinite Wealth is going to do to me in the coming weeks here, and I cannot wait. This game is going to break me. That game's going to break me. This game broke me, and I loved it. And the fact also that this also does come with a little bit of a demo for Infinite Wealth, that's a nice little touch to it too. And another thing that I love is they don't let you play it until after you've beaten the game. They're like, no, if you want to play the Infinite Wealth demo, beat the game. So yeah, it's really fun. I love it, much like all the other Like a Dragon Yakuza-like games. It's fantastic, and I loved it. And I know Like a Dragon Ishin came out earlier in the year too, and I love that game too. I feel like that game was fantastic. It was great. The story was great for it as well, and the gameplay is much different compared to any of the other Yakuza-like games. But I don't know. I liked Gaiden a little bit more than Ishin. So that's why Gaiden is on this list, and Ishin, not so much. Even though Ishin would have been, I think Ishin is a good number 11 in my opinion of my top games here. Because like I said, there's a lot of great games that came out. But Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name, is my number 2 top 10 games of 2023. Number 1, Octopath Traveler 2. This list had a lot of sequels on this in the games, and they all improved from their first game. However, none of them improved as much as Octopath Traveler 2 did. I love this game. This game is fantastic. Much like the first game, you have the choice to start as 8 different characters, all with their own story, all with their own motivations, all with their own reasons for what they're doing. And they are all fantastic. The characters, I just fell in love with all the characters right away. I love the characters. The voice acting is fantastic. The gameplay is very similar to, turn-based style RPG like, and the first Octopath Traveler as well. So there's little improvements on that. But where I feel like Octopath Traveler 2 really shines in terms of the first game is it did a lot of things that they improved on a lot of things that I was not a big fan of from the first game. One of the first things is they incorporated a way where you can see all the traveler talks during like someone's story. You know, like if you're following Hikari, which is the character I picked first, if you were doing their like second story or something like that, their second chapter where you have like more, the chance where you have all the other characters. And there's moments like, oh, a cutscene played, and then it's like, oh, hey, there's traveler talks, and you can talk to one of the party members that was in your party, and such. They made it a way where you don't have, where you can go into the menu, and you can watch them all without having, so you would not skip it at all, and you didn't have to like replay the level in order to get those moments, and I love that so much. That was one of the good things too. Another thing is, I feel like they actually acted like a team more so, I feel, in here than they did in the first game. I honestly can't remember if in the first game, but in the second game, when they go into battle, they sometimes would like talk to each other right away when they enter the fight, like that. And then like if someone gets hurt, like if someone like loses a lot of health, say like if Ochette lost health, then Cassie would come in like, Ochette, are you okay? Like they do stuff like that, and you know, they say thank you if they heal them and such, but they say like they you know, they like talk to them in the battle and combat, and I really love that aspect as well in this game. It was great, and I loved it. And of course, the one major thing that I loved, they had their own stories as well. They had kind of like somewhat like two of the characters had stories together, so they kind of like interacted more. There was more interactions. So Hikari and Agnia, they had their own story. It was wonderful. Ochette and Cassie had a story. I love that they each had their own story, which was it was separate, but also somewhat tied in a little bit to how their own separate stories were in a way. And that's another thing too. I think I just loved all of their stories a little bit more than the first Octopath Traveler games. And then, of course, another one of the big things too is there was actually kind of like an epilogue where all the stories actually tied together. There was a tie-in where it's like, the main villain for Hikari's story, like something happened here. The main story for Cassie's, for I can't remember his name, but it starts with. It sucks because I loved all the characters, but I can't remember all their names off the top of my head. They're all great, and it's like, wait a minute, like a character in this character's story, or a character in Hikari's story said something that someone in someone else's story said, and vice versa, and stuff like that. Like, that was really awesome, and then it all ties together. Where once you finish everyone's story, once you finish everyone's like combined story and such, there is a moment where you're like, oh, hey, go do this thing. And then there's like one final big thing that happens afterwards where it all ties together. And you're like, what? You'd be like, oh my gosh, like characters from all the stories are coming together. And you're like, why are you doing this? It's all great. I just loved it. I think Octopath Traveler 2 did the biggest improvements from their first game to their sequel game out of all the games that on this list that were sequel games comparatively, and it was just great, and I loved it so much. Like, it's also a really good game because I got this for the Switch, but I'm really like, I kind of want to pick this up for my PlayStation 5 now as well because it's a fantastic game, and I loved it. Like I said, the side quests are fun too. Yes, there are some moments, and of course the combat, you could accidentally run into an enemy that is way stronger than you necessarily are ready for, so there's issues with that, I'd say, but I'd say it was good. Obviously it had the same kind of like secret boss as the first game too, where I feel like that was somewhat like a predecessor, where in the first game kind of like there's like a quest line that had a way for its, for like the secret boss. That was kind of like a predecessor, I feel like, to how they ended it up here. Even though it was the same concept of like there's that secret boss in here, but then they also had their own kind of like major story end as well that was all tied together, that tied up all 8 stories, which I know is rough to do, but Team Acero, I believe is what they're called. Obviously the same people behind Bravely Default games, Triangle Strategy, Octopath Traveler 1, obviously, Lifestyle Daily, all those games, fantastic. I cannot wait to see what more they have. I'm a big fan of these guys. Ever since the first Octopath Traveler game, I've been a big fan of this development team. Obviously behind Square Enix. It's great. It's wonderful. Octopath Traveler 2, I feel like deserves a lot more attention, a lot more love than it did. It did come out, and then like I feel like Square Enix kind of still did kind of a little more of PR for it afterwards, but then it kind of like went down. But it's a fantastic game, and the thing is, like, it also came out very early as well. It came out in February, and it's great. It's such a great game. I feel like a lot more people need to put eyes on these games, and again on the developers. And it's really great that it did come out for a lot more stuff than the first game. The first game only came out for a Switch, and then I believe a few years later is when it came out for PC, and I think it's also on Xbox as well. And Octopath Traveler 2 is going to eventually come out to Xbox later this year, so that's great. If they do bring the first game out to PlayStation, I'll probably play it again on the first game, because I do love the first game. Don't get me wrong, the first game's still great, but the second game, I feel like it's just had so much. It has a lot more of it, and it was just wonderful. I enjoyed it so much, start from finish. All their stories, everything, all the characters, the combat. Like I said, the combat's not really much different from the first game. Which, I mean, what else can you really do? How else can you improve on that? Oh, they did! They each have their own little unique abilities, where there's a circle where they can have their own abilities. Where Throne, the thief, her ability could be she gets to act again at the end of the turn. So if she's like the first one to go, or no matter where she's at, she gets to act again after everyone else is gone. Hikari kind of gets to embrace like a power, can use unique abilities. The scholar, Oswald the scholar, it enhances his magical abilities, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember all their abilities off the top of my head, but it's been a while, so I can't really quite remember it. But all those unique abilities are fantastic, and they're great. Cassie's abilities are Apothecary. She's the Apothecary. Cassie's ability lets her mix her abilities without using items. So like if she's mixing an item, she can mix an item that like boosts the entire party. So you use the Bravely aspect, where you can hit it and you get to do like 4 actions or whatever. You tie that into her thing where she can mix 4 or 5 items. So you can mix items like, okay, you mix this item, it'll heal everyone, or you mix this item and whatever you're going to use is going to affect the entire party. Mix this item, give them all their SP back. Mix this item, give them all their health back. Give this to boost their attack. Give this to give them more stuff or whatever. So you can really boost your party like that too. So it's really great. It's really fun. And another thing is that each of the party members have 2 separate actions that they can take depending on the time of day. In the daytime, Hikari can challenge people to duels, which is fun. Or at night, he bribes people for information. Cassie, in the daytime, can get information. And at night, she can put people to sleep or give them medicine and stuff like that. It's a mix and match of that stuff over now and then. Like, between... They're all kind of like... They each have the same ability. One just could like do it at the daytime, one can do it at night. Throne can steal stuff during the day, and she can knock people out at night. Or it could be the other way around. I can't remember. But it's all great. It's fantastic. This game is wonderful. I loved it start to finish. Again, if a game like this makes me want to pick it up on like another console, I feel like it's a really great game. And Octopath Traveler 2 is a wonderful game as well. And I loved all the characters, all the voice acting as well. I feel like I feel like everything just got a step up from the first game. So whatever this team does, if there's an Octopath Traveler 3 at some point, you know I'm going to cover that because I fucking love this game series. It's wonderful, and I cannot wait. And of course, whatever this development team does, I'm going to be all over because I loved it. I love Triangle Strategy. I love the first Octopath Traveler game. Love Bravely Default because they're helping out with all that stuff too. Bravely Default was a great game as well. If they bring Bravely Default 1 and Bravely Default Endlair that were on the DS and 3DS, if they are able to bring that to the Switch here, I would love that too. Because, yeah, I'd cover that because those games are wonderful and I love them. And I can't wait to see more what this team has to offer. And that is why Octopath Traveler 2 is my number 1 top 10 games of 2023. Well, guys, that was my top 10 games of 2023. It was really hard to come up with this list, as I mentioned at the beginning of the game, but there's just so many games that came out, and they're all wonderful. And again, this is just my opinions, my thoughts, my feelings on all the games that came out, especially these top 10 games in general. And if there's any games that didn't make this list that you thought like, oh, why didn't this game make the list, or why didn't that game make the list, I am gonna make a honorable mentions video that's coming out after this, where I will explain why that game didn't make the list for one reason or another. But yeah, guys, this year was fantastic, and 2024 doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon. Especially early on. It's going to be very RPG heavy. We have Infinite Wealth coming out close to the end of January. Then we have Persona 3 Reload coming out at the beginning of February, and then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth coming out at the end of February. Unicorn Overlord coming out in March. The Rephantasmo Memphos, however you pronounce that name, from Atlas coming out later in the year. It's going to be a crazy year as well, and I can't wait for it. And I hope you all are expected for it. This 2024 is going to be a big year in terms of games as well, I feel. I know, again, I say that every year, and I mean, every year it feels great to say because they're great. So yeah, but yeah, guys, thank you all again for watching this video, and let me know how you guys felt about my list. Were you surprised about where I put certain games and such? And let me know what your guys' top 10s were, or how you feel about where I put them and such. I'd love to hear the discussion and such, because again, that's all. I feel like that's what it is. We're just here to talk about our love for video games. No need to get mad for one reason or another just because I put your number 1 game at like number 10 or number 6 or whatever. Doesn't mean I loved it. Doesn't mean I did not enjoy myself with it. There's just a lot of games and such. And you probably put my number 1 game at your 10 or didn't even have it on your list. But yeah, I feel like that's what this is. This is just for a love of video games, and just in general, it's wonderful. It's nice to have a discussion. So yeah, just let me know how you guys felt about this list, and what you had for your own top 10 games. I'd love to hear it. So again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.